Welcome to the Neophytes of Narratology, the internet's most pretentious and pseudo-intellectual pursuit since, perhaps, Nietzsche's thus podcast Zarathustra, or Camus' renowned Vlog of Sisyphus. While lesser men aspire to stand on the shoulders of mere giants, we at the Lost Signals will accept nothing less than titans. So join us as we delve into the fundamentals of narrative nuance and critique the critics who proclaim to know the universal qualities of effective storytelling.
So I'm going to start this off with saying my bad. When searching for another article to assess for the Neophytes of Narratology, I decided that we were educated enough to delve into deeper theory, specifically deconstructionism. Mm-hmm. So I found that Jacques Derrida had is one of the prominent names within that theory. And I found a nice little documentary on him online. But we watched it. It was interesting discussion of Derrida's life, but really didn't have the substance that could lead to a discussion. Yeah. So I went to find some work by him to make our watching the documentary not in vain, and found Differance. And that has nothing to do, in a way, with narrative theory. It's more linguistic and philosophy of language. But here we are, have the discussion. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Thurlow.
And I am different from
Stephen Ramosi.
And I'm indifferent.
Yes. So nice. Today we read Differance by Jacques Derrida, which was when I was researching it, said that this was one of his more important works, or a foundational work of his. Mm-hmm. And I thought, it probably had to do with narrative theory, and it's very tangentially related, but nonetheless, I think we can get a brief discussion over it.
Sure.
Yeah.
You said, it's mostly more of a linguistical sort of analysis, if you will. Right. Broadly, that's what it is.
So I would say that his it's actually a speech he gave, divided into three parts.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
The first is, which makes sense once you understand what his theory of difference is, but he discusses, in a sense, what difference isn't.
Yeah.
And also kind of give context and basically discussing here are some other interpretations, and here's a very linguistical interpretation. And then the second part is him actually expounding upon the theory. Then the third part is his application of that theory into more things than just creating a new word.
Right. Which isn't a word. Or a concept.
Yeah. Okay. You beat me to it. I was going to throw that in there at some point, as he likes to reiterate it. Yes.
He says over and over and over again.
Sure.
Claims that it's not a word or a concept.
In this work.
However. Yeah, but I think there's an interesting thing when I was reading philosophy is that there's a big school of thought in philosophy that the words should be read kind of in a vacuum. That the context doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter who the individual is who's writing it or when, what came before. Yeah. And it's something to be just assess the various words of it. I don't agree with that theory. I think context is very important.
Do I.
So we actually got a lot of context into the daily life of Derrida through the documentary, which can be found on YouTube. Interesting, but he's going into something that if you're a linguist and don't understand that he's writing in French. He's a French philosopher, and he begins with discussing a French verb, differ, D-I-F-F-E-R, which has two meanings that in English, the difference between that has already been split with
exactly.
To defer and to differ. But he's discussing that in French, this word has the same verb for it. It's very interesting. Actually, I'm a big fan of linguistic theory that defer and differ actually have the root in the French verb. And it comes from the Latin differo, which is the prefix dis, actually, like discord and dissociate, plus fero, which is the verb to bear and carry. And so the S changes to an F linguistically, and basically it's a negative or irregular object, something that basically goes to the idea of the negative, which we'll talk about later. Which it's something you have the ordinary, and you have the what would be something that's different than that ordinary thing. Actually, it kind of reminds me of the uncanny from Freud
a little bit.
Yeah.
But in the same sense of something that isn't, that is outside the norm, or at least that's what the original intention of the verb was. But so he goes on with saying, we provisionally give the name difference to the sameness, which is not identical by the sound writing of its a. And I guess this is where it goes into, he creates a word which is not a word or a concept, as you pointed out, by having difference, as you would imagine it's spelled in English, but with an A attached to it.
Difference.
No, it's actually pronounced exactly the same. It's a homophone.
Well, no one would know what you were talking about because you just said it has an A attached to it.
Oh, yeah, so, difference. That's
D-I-F-F-E-R-A-N-C.
Yes.
And he lays it all out like it's more
to give a... How would you guys describe it? Like kind of a overarching idea of the difference.
He's trying to extract the context and the various facets it can have because of the nature of how it is in the French language. So in order to do that, he has to lay out this groundwork that explains here's what I'm trying to do with this one word, and because it can take on sort of this manifestation and this other one, but it sort of encapsulates both, or this word has both of them contained therein. We thus have to, as you said, we have to start with saying what it is not, and so forth.
Having read this,
it's kind of a difficult read to start out with. We'll admit that.
I'm still not 100% sure what he's trying to make this word be, because he, as I said, he over and over again says that it is not a word or
a concept. He says it a couple of times.
Definitely more than a couple. And he's trying to have this, I don't even know what to call it if I can't call it a concept, of something that, exists within non-existence, right? It's like in the same way where he says everything that it's not in the beginning, I feel like that's kind of his idea of the definition of it, is that here are all the things that it's not actually a thing, right? And here are the things that it isn't. And that's kind of what I felt like he was trying to do throughout. And
it seems like a weird, I have in my notes, sort of like a paradox of definition.
Another very important part of it is that he's talking about how it exists, I guess, in both outside of time and space, but also within
it is beyond
time and space.
Your normal understanding.
So if you look at the structure of, if let's say we combine for a second in English, defer and differ into the original verb. Let me see. One, differ means that A does not equal B. It's a strict sentence that this is not
delineation.
That. The other one says that A equals A, but the context of A does not equal, or A in the context 1 does not equal A in the context 2.
Subsect 1.
And that they're that they exist differently in time and space. And I think he is trying to, in a sense, in addressing trying to unify the two meanings in the same word, he's trying to create a greater theory based off of that.
Yeah. But I certainly got the sense of that. That seems to be his intent, and he, if not outright admits it, it seems to be very heavily implied, contained there, in at least in his opening statements, his opening third or so of the article.
Yeah,
and it's an assemblage; it's not a word.
I picked that out as well. Yes.
So I'm going to read another part that perhaps illuminate his own vision of this. On the one hand, it is not a matter of describing a history, of recounting the steps text by text, context by context, each time showing which scheme has been able to impose this graphic disorder, although this could have been done as well. Rather, we are concerned with the general system of all these schemata.
Yeah, exactly.
On the other hand, the word assemblage seems more apt for suggesting that the kind of bringing together proposed here has the structure of an interlacing, a weaving, or a web which would allow the different threads and different lines of sense or force to separate again, as well as being ready to bind others together, which is flashbacks to me of Bart, especially with the web of understanding. Yeah, exactly. And he goes into the homophonic aspect of the two words, which I think, again, I think this even more demonstrates where he's coming from. It cannot be heard, and we shall see in what respects it also beyond the order of understanding.
Yes. So I'm looking at the exact line. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, he goes into describing.
That's his general setup.
Yeah,
it's tricky because, like, real quickly, as we said, like, we already, if you will, English did it. Like, they already picked out this one is this one is that. Whereas in a different language, so he's trying to extract that. At the time, I think it was this. Actually, it was a talk I believe he gave, presenting the paper in like 68 or 67 in the French Philosophical Society. So, sure, like it's difficult because reading it in English as a translation, it becomes somewhat convoluted because of that very nature of it.
Right,
is all.
So, I mean, we can go on in trying to parse what he's trying to say. He talks about sense and reference. I'm a big Frege disciple, I suppose, who goes into this. And I mean, I had the most experience here, yes, sure. Of all that kind of aspects. He goes into causality, which is the difference caused by anything,
the temporal nature and so forth.
Yeah, and it really, like, it leads him on a very long-winded path. Yes. Let me see if I can find to where he actually.
I think it's at least 287 or 6 page number.
Yeah, so I have it. We shall designate the term difference, the movement by which language or any code, any system of reference in general, becomes historically constituted as the fabric of differences. And it's kind of going into that, like, that the difference lies in the a word. When you use a sign like Scott over here, like we're talking about Scott, and when we address him in the present tense, it's different than
present being. It's present being. He uses a lot. Yeah, it's
not absolutely what it is, and we're kind of. He says that we're defining things by what Scott is not. I kind of disagree with it. The rest of this kind of goes into application of it, but again, I would recommend.
If you really want to know, read it. Like, it's not all that.
Yeah, I think if you want to
necessarily complicated.
Yeah,
it's pretty dense.
Yeah,
right, I will say that if you're reading it, I'm honestly I'm not sure what the difference between difference and difference is. Still, at this point, having read it earlier today, what is his definition of the difference between difference with an E and difference with an A?
You have. You can describe, in a sense, the difference between these two classes in multiple different ways to show how they're. But the difference with the A is, I think, the kind of abstract concept of
it's the concept that beyond normal definition, beyond space,
not of liquid, the distance between them. However you want to decide it. The difference is everything that can
is
be brought
different
together.
Than everything else.
No, but everything that can be every aspect that can be described to differentiate one glass from another glass. In this case, I think that's where he's going with it. Again, I don't think I could assess this in a vacuum.
Right, and that's kind of where I looked at it. Like I thought that there were interesting passages in this, and ones that I enjoyed reading, and things that different parts of it that really like grabbed onto me, or that I grabbed onto while I was reading it. But as a whole, I think I need to either read more of him or read more of the people that he's referencing in this. He talks a lot about like the Nietzsche's philosophy of the unconscious mind and stuff like that, which I didn't really see how that connected. Sure, I like some of that stuff, saying, yes. But like I don't. I guess I didn't just get how that played into.
Well, I think he was describing and this is in the application part. He's suggesting that Freud and Nietzsche, which he does in the
I
same.
think he says they arrived at the same
conclusion, except that they didn't word it
as
the
such.
correct way,
Right.
like Derrida worded it. But he's also been called a terrorist of obscutarianism, which is my favorite.
And is now his
Please, someone
new life's goal.
call me that on Facebook. But I don't know. I didn't really buy into what he was saying, perhaps because I didn't have the context of what he was talking about.
Sure.
But I wasn't particularly impressed right away, and nor was I. Like, I found him interesting in watching the documentary,
Mm-hmm.
but I have philosophers that I prefer before
Yeah.
this.
I guess, like you said, like perhaps we should read one of his like purely deconstruction works, like
Yes.
when he delves into
Yeah.
it. But regardless, he does say, Sivo, and to that point as well, he does mention at least once or twice, read some of my other writings for the greater context. So sure, without having done that, it's a bit more narrow interpretation. As
And
we
also, you got to look at the audience. His audience is a bunch
Yeah.
of academics who
said. He's speaking
are familiar
in a
with his
lecture
work.
hall, essentially,
Right,
at a conference, more or less.
So again, my bad on this. I thought we were getting something different than we actually did.
Yeah, if you're pure linguistical studies, like as you are, like this would be something you would read in one of your grad school like level
Yeah,
classes.
and I
But-
enjoyed what I read, but
Yeah.
I don't know how much I could talk about this without
Right.
referencing other philosophers.
Exactly.
Just like he can.
And he does.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
kind of a funny
Um,
point. For sure.
So, any final thoughts?
Well, I think pretty much anybody that you read is gonna have all those references too. But
But regardless,
yeah, I mean, I was as I was reading this, you had told me the quote that you just said about him being a terrorist of
Mhm.
obscutarianism, or whatever it was, and I couldn't help but think that was a perfectly apt way to describe this type of like his
sure.
style of
It's
writing.
Yeah, sure.
It's very dense, and like I feel like a lot of times he just is using way more complex ways to talk about this stuff than he really needed to.
Well, I've got French word games.
and it may be
one of my notes.
it may be because of the translation, but it was like I felt like there was an easier way, or a more clear way to explain what he was trying to explain here.
But it also goes to, again, his audience and all that. I guess the last point I want to make on this, I forgot about, was his idea of difference. It's not something that's active voice or passive voice. He suggests middle voice, which doesn't exist. I don't believe in French, and it doesn't exist in English. But the idea is it's almost a reflexive thing. So, like, I shaved is theoretically I shaved myself, but it's the idea that when something is different than something else, it doesn't have a causal chain. It's more of like it's both the actor and the actee.
Yeah, and he explores that a little bit. But
Yes.
sure, that was an interesting point that as this one of the more satisfying things I derived from this article. But like it's not all for consideration. But either way, like we said, if you're really interested in check it out. I don't really have any more final thoughts.
Yeah,
it was a nice read, but not exactly in line with what we normally would analyze.
Yeah, it was out, and honestly, I like reading things that are out of our comfort zone.
But to be
every
fair,
once in a while.
I enjoy expanding
it
my
was
knowledge.
It was an interesting read. I'm not gonna. I ain't mad at having read it, But yeah, there's not much more I can say about it. I would like to explore more about him and deconstructionism as a whole, really, because I don't know that much about it. And I think that would be an interesting, topic to delve into a little bit deeper.
My final thought / joke / pun is having read this, well, that was certainly something different.
As I'm not going to beat that joke, I'm Jonathan E. Manzer here with Scott Thurlow.
See you next time.
And Stephen Ramosi.
Have a good night.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.